I think we're live. Make sure that YouTube is
Let's
operating.
word and see how long it lasts, and then we'll know. Stop.
Okay. Okay. I think it says live on my YouTube tab. So I guess we can go ahead and start. Paul, thanks for joining me on this fine evening.
Rowan, my condolences. Once again, your cult leader lies in the dust.
Yes, yeah, you have sufficiently spanked him once again. How did you enjoy your conversation with Destiny? How was your any post thoughts that you've had about it?
Yeah, we got too drilled down and stuff. I didn't want to get bogged down on stuff that I find irrelevant.
Sure, like the education thing. Or
Education
the archery thing.
art is irrelevant. But no, it was good. It's good in hindsight. I think it had a much better reception than I anticipated. But yeah, I'm schizo and he's autist. It's Richard Dawkins and Jordan Peterson, to a much lower extent.
Right.
So yeah, the whole central point was the whole vibes thing underneath it, and I'm happy to have done the first wave, the brute force over the ladder, throwing my body in by just saying it's all vibes, bro, which is not what I believe, but good enough.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, I mean, so I guess we can start here by I wrote some things down that I wanted to hit. So I guess to begin, I think we're in large agreement that I think a lot of people, most people, I would say probably over 50% operate on vibes and not for whatever reason they don't have the time or the ability to like deep dive policy issues. And this is like a fact of the human condition. Um, do you think that like if you had the power to change that percentage of people that were like that versus people that critically thought a bit more and had the time and the energy to do those dives into things, I mean, would you lower or would you increase that percentage of people?
And I also don't agree with the statement that 50% of people base things on vibes and 50% based on facts. It's not how it works. Everyone uses a combination of vibes and facts.
Sure.
The impression that I certainly gave, but do not believe, is that you elevate. First off, vibes is a mean way of saying intuition, and intuition is the technique. Like intuition is what allows us to tell whether or not like a joke is funny. Like we can't describe it per se, or like why one song is better than others. It's like you can apply rational musical theory analysis, but you can never get to the fundamentals of like, well, why do the circle of fifths intuitively ring true to us or whatever, or why does a major key inspire or feel like positive emotion and minor feel like negative? Is it just enculturation? I don't believe it's a case on that particularly, but everyone uses intuition. Like your brain is primarily limbic system, and then you have this weak little cortex. Not you, well, but everyone. Compared to your limbic system, your cortex is incredibly weak, and so your limbic system is feeding you all this intuition and stuff, and then you do a lot of rationalization on top of it. Of course, the rationalization is important. The way I describe it is it's two different skill sets. Okay, it's blacksmithing, and then sword play or sword mat. I don't know. Blade is what it's called in Skyrim and Oblivion, I believe.
Right.
Blacksmithing is like Socratic dialogue, rational, propositional. Let's get to the facts. Autism, essentially, in its extreme form. That is necessary for building a strong sword. Okay, to craft a strong theory, you need to do Socratic dialogue. You have to know the facts. But then using that sword is a completely different skill. So you could craft you have 100 points in blacksmithing, you can craft the master sword. But if you have 10 points in blade, it doesn't matter, and vice versa. So you need to put points in both. You need to be able to craft good theories and use it. But
I'm with you so far.
But using it, that's schizophrenia. That's the artist. That's the vibes.
Mm-hmm.
No, I certainly don't believe facts are not important. Most of my videos are laying out like clips from a Jordan Peterson lecture or Ian McGilchrist or whoever. So vibes are as important as rationalization. They work together. And my point is, you can't ignore vibes if you're communicating stuff.
I mean, I'm 100% with you on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So because yeah, and like you were saying, I mean, there has to be a team composition, right? So it's like you have to have some autists who just their entire lives are being research scientists and they do the deep dive stuff, and then you have people who are really good comedians who understand timing, right? Because vibes obviously matter a lot. I guess my point more was that like there's clearly a spectrum of people who like we all operate on intuition to some extent. Every single person does, but there is a spectrum in terms of like the amount of policy arguments that we factor into who we're going to end up voting for, right? And so there's like on the far end of the spectrum, there's people who couldn't name you a single policy position of
Right.
their given candidate, but their whole thing is like, he just seems trustworthy. I think he has good vibes. I think he
Yeah.
just seems, so that's like the most extreme vibes only person. And
Yeah.
then on the other end, there's a person who's like, I don't care at all about what they like, who they are, like as a person, whatever. I just care about like, here are these facts about the policies, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
they're going to pass. And then in the middle, you have some blend of both, right? But I think we have, there's some stat that I read a while back that was like, it was like 40 or like 50% or some like wild number of people can't name one policy position of the candidate that they want to vote for with any level of detail. So that's more what I'm talking about. You're correct, we all use intuition um, on some level, which I think is just a system of pattern recognition, right? That is trained over time. There is a science to it, even if we can't articulate the science or kind of like the underlying mechanism, it is there. I guess what I'm asking more is like, of the people who are more just about vibes and they don't really care about policy much at all versus the people who are more policy than vibes. Like if you were talking
Wait,
to a
Ron, can you
person,
hear me?
yeah, you blacked out for a moment there.
Hold on.
You were gone, Paul. You left.
Wait.
The dog ate you. That's what I think happened, and then it spit you right back out. Oh, I'm alone. Hello, stream. Do I have any comments yet? I can't see comments while the streamer things is full. Um, shit. Hang on. Okay, we have a couple chats. Inward farts, assuming the person you dislike is intentionally deceptive, is a vibe. Yes, I would agree. Stephen Colbert, she says, "Hey guys, I like that you both engage with Destiny, even though he's so superior to you both." Excellent, excellent. What do we have here? Sup, fellows? What is up, Abby? Abby the duck. Mr. McCord says we can't trust nobody. I don't know if it's supposed to be not a double entendre. What's the thing where it's like you have a double negative? So if we can't trust nobody, do you mean that we can actually trust everybody? Audio on your end is great so far. Awesome. Okay, let's let Paul back in. I don't know, guys. Should we let Paul back in? Should we let Paul back on the stage? I think I might. I think I might. Here he is.
I just did this. I just faked a connection thing to cut you off and your point.
Oh, excellent. Excellent.
No, I turned off my phone notifications. I turned off banners, phone calls, so we'll see.
For the best. But yeah, I guess my broad question mainly is just of the people who are more just about vibes and like not about policy, if you could, would you encourage those people to look into policy more and try to go less off of vibes and charisma? If you could twist that dial a bit.
Like you are thinking of a trade-off. I'm thinking of it as two separate skills. It would be better if you had more points in both skills.
Sure.
So it's not a trade-off.
Sure. I mean, I think sometimes it's a bit of a trade-off, though, isn't it? Because you have a person who maybe say they support a candidate just because they think that they're funny at the expense of they don't really understand any of their policy positions. But then you have a person who still acknowledges that that candidate is funny, but then they dive into the policy and then they decide, hey, yeah, this person's funny, but they stand for things that would hurt me and my family and the country.
Yeah.
So even though I know that they're funny, which everyone can tell, they're still not going to vote for them because that overrides their perception of that person's vibe. So it's not a trade-off, but it is like I think one kind of I think policy does supersede vibes in terms of like at least with how I think. I can acknowledge that a person like Trump is really, really funny, but then I look at his policies and I go, okay, that's more important to me than whatever vibes that he might have,
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Describing a generally intelligent person. That's what generally intelligent people do, is they make up their mind by thinking about things more. And to be fair, the analogy I gave about blacksmithing versus blade, that's for communicating. That's not for like making decisions off of, because like,
right.
Like it's like you need to have a good theory and then you need to be able to communicate in a way that is relatable. That's the blade skill. as far as decision making, it's not really like to make a decision is to think. Like everyone's thinking is motivated by, all reasoning is motivated reasoning. You agree with that, right?
Yes.
Okay, so from a decision making point of view, it's like, would I prefer that people were more informed before they made decisions? Yes, on literally everything. But I guess my point would be, like with Destiny, I think the things that he thinks is important to inform them about are not as important.
Okay.
Whether or not Donald Trump committed an insurrection clearly didn't matter in the, like, to the voting base.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the wrong fact to prioritize. The question is which facts of the matter is the relevant discussion at? And he's and like with the Vivek, the whole Vivek example of like, let's go through the criminal code. It's like, yeah, that is relevant, like to get down to it. And I said, with like, if I'm going to say something about transgender studies with children, which I'm absolutely right on, there's not a single long-term study ever done, and I'm more than open to have people send me it via email or whatever. Why did I bring that up? Because I don't know. Why did I just bring that up?
I think you were talking about how the facts of the matter have to be filtered.
Yeah, you have to choose which facts are relevant. And the fact that I think is more relevant is the fact of people's feelings. Like someone said, you're a feelings over facts guy. I'm like, yeah, of course, because no one cares unless you prime their feelings to be open to that. Like, that's human. That's like basic 101. And the fact
the second video that I ever made was called "Feelings Don't Care About Your Facts."
Yeah, so exactly.
I totally
that is like,
that is correct.
Law, and people who disagree are probably themselves more fact oriented. One might even say autistic.
Right.
I am trying to cut back on that, because when I say I believe like our culture is like this is a very autistic way of looking at things, I don't mean that as like an insult. I mean that in like a technical sense of like autism is like more vertical thinking versus schizophrenia, which is horizontal thinking. J-Reg has, it's autism.
Lots of lateral connections. Yes.
Yeah. So
yeah, lots of those.
So we agree.
Sorry.
So we agree pretty much.
I mean, yeah, I think on that broad look at how to be an effective communicator, I would for sure agree with that. I think that though the way that you were talking to Destiny just like kind of made it sound like you were saying that like it's basically all vibes, and I believe at the end you said that you think that there's not very many facts of the matter that actually matter in the end.
I think there are more things that there is no fact of the matter at base of it.
Sure. So, okay. So that might be a good thing to touch on here, because I think to your point, I mean, the kind of advice that we would give is going to depend on who we're talking to, right? So it's like, if we're talking to a person who's a consumer of media, we would probably tell them to be more of a critical thinker. But if we're talking to a person in media who is, their job is to communicate things to people, we would tell them to be more charismatic, right? So it's like both the listener and the speaker both need to be better at the thing that they're doing.
Well, I don't. Yeah, and I'm elaborating on this as I'm talking about it. But like, yeah, the blacksmith versus blade skill thing, I think makes sense at a simple level to illustrate. Like obviously it's helpful to be more charismatic, but you can't have that as a goal. That's self-defeating. Like, my goal is to be as funny as possible. It's like, that's not really how it works. Your goal is to point out truths in an unexpected way, with a natural delivery, and then that happens to be funny. You can't just say, I need to be more charismatic. It produces the opposite effect. Or you get the level, like pickup artist type thing. But I think it's more of it's like, there are facts about psychological states of mind and the way people receive facts. There's facts about the way that people receive facts. Those are more important than what the actual facts are on the ground in terms of communicating. What the facts are on the ground is what's necessary to know, well, who's right and who's wrong, to even like, what idea should I even advocate for? And like on a lot, like, okay, like with the just as an example, the point about Maha, Make America Healthy Again. I guess he was like, I don't know anything about that, and I'm like, are you open? I said, are you open to you potentially being wrong about the degree to which it's impactful? He's like, no, not really. I just look at exit polls. It's like, okay, fair enough. That's an example of like, there are facts about whether or not we're in a chronic health epidemic. It would seem to me that like if those are good talking points, go rob them. Like, don't give them to the vaccine denier, right? And it's a question of which facts are relevant. And it's like, that's why I was trying to talk about the facts about how people make up their mind is more important than the facts that they're making their mind up about, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's divide this into maybe two broad topics then. One would be like our role as communicators that we can continue right now, but then later I want to get to our role as consumers of information, because you said some things at the end that I want to get to in terms of like why you trust Vivek because you feel like he has good vibes. I want to talk about that a little bit. But yeah,
A question
I think.
too, so.
Sorry.
Remind me to ask you a question as well when you're done with those.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as we communicate, we're in agreement. We have to be charismatic, and we have to talk about things that are true. I think the problem though is that it's like we have to be able to do those deep dives and be autistic to find out things that are true in the first place. Or, and this goes to being a consumer, find people that we trust to do those deep dives for us, right? And that's kind of the challenge. But I would say, like, do you agree with my model here? I drew out a little square. I have my model of epistemology. I think in our second conversation ever, you said something that I still will pass through my mind to this day, and it pissed me off. And what it was you said something about how like there's no difference between like the truth of something and its application or something, or it was because it was in our trans debate about trans people or trans kids, and I was trying to give my model of what gender is conceptually, and you were like, this doesn't matter, and I said something like, well, we have to first build this kind of model of truth before we can apply it to see how it touches the ground. And you were like, no, there's no difference, like it's the same thing, blah blah blah. You were kind of in debate mode. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
you remember that or if
I don't
that rings true to your memory.
I don't remember exactly, but I understand why I might have said that.
I mean, okay, so I want to walk you through these three things, and I want you to see if you agree that this is how you view reality. I look at it like there's three kind of layers to things. So one, there is the truth. I think the truth is singular, it is objective, it is attitude independent, and it exists regardless of whether or not we know about it or not. Like if I'm in a room and you're in the room and there's a cookie on a plate, and you're like, hey, don't eat the cookie, it's my cookie, and you leave the room, and you come back later and the cookie's gone, it's completely vanished, right? And you ask me if I ate it, and I say, no, I didn't eat the cookie. I either ate the cookie or I didn't, right? And so whether or not you ever know the truth of that, there does exist a singular truth that you can never come to
Yeah.
know for certain, but it is okay.
Like
So
the
truth
number,
exists outside of us. Would you agree with that?
yes.
Okay,
Oh, hold on. Sorry. Provisionally,
sure,
yes. I mean,
sure.
depends on how deep.
What does provisionally mean, Paul? What is this hedging you're doing
It
here?
means, for the sake of exploring this further. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. The second layer that I have here is how we come to quote unquote know the truth, which really is just trying to reduce uncertainty as close to zero as it can possibly go. Um, and that is like how we come to know a thing. But whenever we say that we know something, it's never, there's no such thing as true certainty, but we just get as close as we possibly can to that zero. Would you also agree with that?
Yeah, I think Richard Dawkins in his book The Extended Phenotype, I think, points out that causality is actually a statistical, like, you can never approach, like, you cannot say X causes Y. What you technically can say is X causes Y 99.9999 infinity percent of the time.
Right.
It's more complicated than that, but yes.
Yeah, because there are three things to causality, right? There's like temporal precedence, correlation, and then one other thing. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if
Um,
shit and all that, but whatever. Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
So on base reality, there is the truth. Then there is how we come to know and guess at truth. And then three, there's how we persuade people about truth, which is where communication comes in. So like whenever I think of science, there's those three layers of like interplay, right? So there is there is some truth of reality, and then there is like the scientists trying their best with studies and trying to perfect their methodology, trying to get at that truth as best as they can. And then there's how they communicate that to the public. And so those are kind of the filters that things have to pass through to get to the general public, is like it has to be discovered, hopefully in a way that is true and accurate, and that it has to get to us through some kind of like media apparatus or person like Neil deGrasse Tyson, for example. And so would you agree that that is like a good model to view reality and science and like media through?
Well, let's see how that. It's a good model depending on how well it achieves whatever purpose you're trying to achieve with it.
Okay. 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 Point two that I had here, and already you've said things that I think already kind of answer some of these. I think whenever you were talking with Destiny, you came across as much more vibes based than I think I know you to be, actually. But
well, how about that?
Yeah, sure. Here, let me just
how the fuck? I'm not gonna fucking argue with him on anything. Or I'm gonna try.
Right.
Because think about it. How many people are watching this right now?
9 right now.
I suspect that most of them are Destiny fans. Let's just say, or are familiar with. Okay, and I'll ask you this and all the Destiny fans who are watching this. Think of one thing that you think Destiny is wrong about, and then ask how confident you would be debating him about it on his own stream, and who would optically win.
Oh, he is wrong as shit about the court case, Citizens United, and I could beat him on that very easily. I could.
Okay, what about do you like Dave Smith, right?
Yeah, sometimes.
Okay, what about if you argued about whether or not Dave Smith is a net positive? Who would win that debate?
Probably Destiny.
Yeah, right. But you still believe it, right? That Dave Smith is a net positive?
I don't know. I just know that I like him because he's funny.
Look at that. Destiny doesn't even have to debate you. He just your mind. It's like, hey, maybe I shouldn't believe that. Fine, whatever. But yeah. So like, it's also, I don't know. I've only talked to him once before, and then it's a weird, it's like the conversations in front of what ultimately ends up being like hundreds of thousands of people. So it's already a weird fucking, but it seems like it's like an intimate conversation like we're having here, which
sure.
All of those things. Like I do
Well, just real quick, when I said that you were more vibes based with him, I
Yeah.
didn't mean that like the way that you talked was vibes based, but the things like how you appeared to be arguing for vibes being like kind of like the most important thing over things being true. That's more what I meant, not your presentation.
I said this and I believe this. It's like my job, I don't have a job, but my goal when I talk to him is not to convince anyone of anything. It's to genuinely ask the questions that I'm curious about. Like, did he actually watch any of Vivek's stuff before he said that he's the litmus test whether or not he's a fucking idiot?
Yeah.
But why was I saying that? But
this is what AI could help with. If we ever like forget the previous thing that we were talking about, it can tell you where you're
yeah, that's fair.
I was going.
I also may have hit the pen a few times.
Oh, nice.
I'm nicotined up, and only nicotine.
Excellent.
But my goal is not to convince anyone. My goal is to genuinely be true. So, and at that point, I'm like, yeah, like the vibes thing is like I'm leaning on that in a way that I could have been more. There's all kinds of things I would have rather done and not talked about, and we could have gotten out of. But like,
sure.
I think that, but it's like life is an iterated game. I'm here to win the meta game, not the game.
Very true.
Happy to cognitive berserker up the ladder, first one up, carves out the initial space, immediately gets killed. That was me in the second conversation. Okay, if I talk to him again, I think I have a better idea of some things we can talk about that are not directly attached to, like, what do you think about Department of Education? I want to ask, like, let's discuss whether or not it's objectively true that Tank Vane is worse or better than APZ or something like that, which is league terminology.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know those.
Get to the deeper issue that I'm interested in, but we'll see.
For sure. Yeah.
That I was
Sorry, your voice cut out.
more vibes based, and then I cut you off. Whatever you were moving on to next.
Sure, and the perfect is the enemy of the good, right? So it's like it's always better just like jump in, like have those conversations, and then like have like a better one every time for sure. I also want to. I'm trying to think of what I would talk to him about on a stream. And it's hard to come up with things because I'm in such agreement on like so many things with him that the only thing that I could ever debate him on, because I'm further left than Destiny, like for sure. And so the only thing that I could do is to like have some kind of debate on some leftist policy or try to convince him that Kyle Kalinske is worth building a bridge with, which I want to do at some point because I love Kyle. But
See that?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that would be an interesting. You'd be a small cog making a big rotation to the other cogs. If I quote tweeted Vivek and I said, Vivek, you got to bail me out and debate
I
next.
saw that.
If that gets set up now and be like, listen, it's too easy. All right, I'm all about the memes, all the
That'd
vibe.
be incredible,
Okay?
dude. I hope that he sees it.
That would be fun. I was like, if that did happen, I'd be like, I'm so right about everything all the time now because I just came there to start the conversation. Now Vivek can come finish it, and then I can find out truly if Vivek is a psychopath.
Oh God.
But
I would love him and Steven to have a conversation. That would be insane.
Yes, it'd be more interesting than the conversation him and I had.
Okay, so I'll just kind of get through this list here, and then we can just kind of have some free flow convo. So, and these seem obvious, but there's a method to this madness. If you are wrong, if you are placing your trust in someone who is lying to you, question one, you would want to know that, right? And you would hope that everybody would want to know if they were wrong about something.
Yeah, at least at some. Yeah.
Okay, and then I guess the next question, and it could be a point that we talk about for a while. How would you come to know that? What is the pressure test that you would use to see if what you believe is a lie? Like at what point are you okay? Does my belief system touch the ground in truth, and how do you pressure test? Because it feels the exact same to believe a lie as it feels to believe the truth.
Yeah,
right. And so, if at least half of the country is wrong about something, we could be in that half of the country. And so, like, what do you think the test should be to figure that out?
Well, the broader answer is how well does believing that serve me in the real world? Like, if I believe that everyone who voted for Biden for Kamala is like a bad person, all right, I'll go out in the world and treat people who voted for Kamala bad, independent of their actual character. We'll see how far I get with that. There's a separate thing I would say also where it's like, you're making it sound more binary than it is. It's like, well, either the Trump voters were right or the Kamala.
No. I'm not saying on that topic in particular, just in terms of like on any given issue, right? Say if the country is split, some group of people is right and some are wrong. Not to say that Trump voters are wrong about everything.
Not necessarily. Like, because it's like, imagine it's an argument between two like strategy, like this. I keep going back to the. Do you want me to not do League? Are you know?
No. League's fine. We have people in chat who know League apparently.
Yeah, like it's like trying to argue. Like, imagine it's like before you go into a game, you have two different team compositions that you could run. You could run a very aggressive 3-bruiser. I don't know play League anymore, so I don't know what the fucking that is. But like all hyper damage assassins or some shit. Or you could run a very tanky. Everyone has a ton of health, but doesn't do as much damage. Like you could. So when you like for the election or just generally, this would apply. Like you're not arguing about which team is objectively, like it's more of like which strategy should we take in this circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
The only way to find out who's right is to act it out. But like you could pick that strategy and then other things could go wrong, which never affected the strategy to begin with, right? Like if a fucking nuclear bomb goes off tomorrow. It's like, well, if we had voted this way, it would have changed things. Like maybe not. Maybe it was set 2 years ago.
Sure. I guess I'm talking more about like facts of the matter. Like, does man-made climate change exist, or is evolution real, or do vaccines cause autism? Like stuff that there is some ground truth to.
Well, it depends. Like if it's scientific, the scientific method is pretty good is for that.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's like philosophical and having to do in the domain of values, this is the central. This is like the first sentence of Maps of Meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Is there are two worlds. There's the world of facts and the world of values. The world of facts is what the world is made of. The world of facts is how we should act in it. And the world of facts
Yes.
is a scientific method. The world of values is, his claim is mythology, like it encapsulates the best way to act and all that. Like morality. You can't use science to prove morality, right? It's a human thing.
I agree, but I mean, and this is a bit of a side point, I guess, like a tangent, but I think that facts can, like, they definitely shape people's morality, like in the sense of like if you grow up in a religion where it's good to, I don't know, make women cover their bodies every day, and when it's 120 degrees outside, you're gonna think that's a good thing, right? Or like
Yeah.
some obscure cult in, the West Coast that thinks, so like it's actually like okay to like, um I don't
Sacrifice
know, any number of things that you could come right.
knowledge.
So it's like if you believe in like an incorrect, like a fact about the world of like, oh, this God exists and he says that it's actually okay to like sacrifice my son or to do this or to like let the priest touch my kid or whatever, that fact might be counterintuitive at first, but if you grow up in it, it's really easy to manipulate people into being, oh, like this is just normal, and then their morality would be shaped by what they think is a fact. So often like those things do shape our intuitions a little bit.
In like Israel Palestine's example, like if you grew up
Mhm.
Palestinian versus if you grew up Israeli settler, like what you think are obvious moral facts, just they feel obvious, but they're not objectively.
Right, exactly. Which kind of leads us into my next point here, which is that people's intuitions differ wildly, right? And
Yeah,
so like, I mean,
melodies.
people have extremely different reads on people's trustworthiness, on what things are okay versus not okay. So I guess like I'm curious to hear you flesh out a little bit more when it comes to saying that people, you know, ought to go off of intuition whenever they kind of assess if a person is trustworthy, which correct me if that's a misrepresentation of what you said. Um, it's like how can people tell if their intuitions are trustworthy or not?
This is all goes back to pragmatism. It's whether or not those intuitions serve you well.
What if you have an intuition about something where you will never
No,
observe the outcome of it?
like what if it's what if your intuitions tell you to believe one thing, but then you never end up having to test whether or not that thing is true?
Kind of. So more in the sense of like if there is a voter, um, and I'm going to use Trump as an example just because that's like the most proximal thing here. But of course, this is, we could talk about like anything. Um, if you vote for a candidate, say it's Trump or it's Ronald Reagan or it's whoever, and you're a worker and you vote them in and say maybe they pass some policies that maybe weaken your union or cause you, and in some long run to make the structure of the country worse, but in a way that you don't necessarily directly notice, or if you do notice, maybe you don't connect the dots. So maybe it's a consequence that is that its time span is so removed from your choice, that you don't ever really learn a lesson there. So your intuition doesn't get the chance to really like develop because it's either too complicated, too long of a time span, or too indirect of a consequence for you to like to learn from, which I think unfortunately is a lot of politics or things like climate change, where the people who make choices now will not be around to see the consequences of it, or the people who choose to do things like economic deregulation on certain things like polluting rivers or putting certain things in food. They're never going to really directly make the connection that their choice led to this outcome. So that's more what I'm getting at, is it's like, what do we do about those kind of long time scale consequences?
I don't think there's any way. You can't do. There's some stuff that you can never know. Like if I make like right now, if I make a video and I put an idea out there, I have no idea who sees it. I have no idea like if that idea goes to like some like Joe Rogan or someone somehow like just through the fucking cross pollination effect. It's like I have no fucking clue. It's faith. Is like I have
Mm.
faith that I'm doing the right thing. You can't do it. There's no economic policy that you can do a retrospective on and determine whether it was good or not because there's an infinite number of confounding variables. There you can make general claims like something extreme, like taxing people at 100%, or putting price capping something at $1 when it should be $100 or whatever. Like there's enough evidence that alone is significant enough. But like, economics is like, well, what are you maximizing for? Are you maximizing just for cost? Like, if tariffs go up, people's costs will go up. It's like, okay, then what if tariffs were used as a negotiating tactic to long-term reduce the total tariffs or total costs 10 years from now? Like, what's the time frame we're looking at?
Right.
Did you see a video about the no objective historical account?
Yes, I did.
There's a clip of Peterson talking about like the Israel-Palestine conflict. It's like, well, what's the borders of relevancy?
What time scale? Is it 2,000 years? Is it 50?
Right. So economics, it's like, who's deciding that 2 to 5 year economic growth in real wages is the most important metric to be concerned with? You can have more objective conversations about like, well, if we put 100% tariff on shit, that's obviously going to go up. But I don't know. I think my broader point is the world is infinitely complex, so you have to use heuristics.
This is true.
And and I would say exhausting your rational faculties by trying to do the rational calculation of everything, it's impossible. You don't have enough energy and capability to do that. So if you don't rely on heuristics and you don't learn how to like, man, I have to know when to trust this person and when not to, which is like a life thing that you learn that like when you meet friends and which friends you get along with and all that different stuff. Like, it's a much more implicit skill that is not talking about like policy or whatever. Like those things do affect then your like, okay, like who's someone like Kenneth Copeland? You brought this example. You and I and watching are like, this guy's obviously a fucking snake,
total psycho.
Right. We wouldn't be able to make that claim unless we grew up outside of that framework and we're able to recognize we're not, have been around a lot of people. There's also this nuanced part about like what percent of the people that go to that church are doing it because they genuinely like him or because like that's what their family does and they're just going because like, yeah, Kenneth Copeland, like, yeah, he's cool, like whatever, but like whatever.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. But like we use those intuitions we develop in our regular life to then inform other things. So I don't know. I need to do a better job of cutting up what I mean by, because it's not an either or thing. It is either or if you're talking about communicating, and then just generally it's like intuitions and thoughts need to be, they operate together, and you need to
sure
rate those is the right way to think about it.
Yeah, and I'm down to kind of like parse that here for a little bit if you want, because I think yeah, a lot of people's intuitions are shit and they don't realize it. And that's kind of the challenge, right? Is it's like we all think that our intuition is really good, but like how do we, there has to be some pressure test against reality. It has to touch reality at some point to where we can say that if our intuitions are good or bad. Like I know people who are like, they will just date abusive partner after abusive partner and they're never like, oh, like this person has no red flags, and it's like, you're an idiot. Like you just don't understand how to read people at all because you've never mapped this pattern, because that is what intuition is, right? It's just pattern recognition. But if you never are trained on the data set that allows you to see what things turn out badly, your intuition on that topic will never develop. And I think on the topic of things like politics, I agree with you that economics it's very, very complicated. There's so many confounds. There's so many things to measure. But I think it's more doable than we think. And I think that a way that we can look at which policies I think are good is to look at outcomes and to look at history. And that's kind of the next point that I had here was like, unless you can train your intuition on a thing that you can see in your personal life, it will never develop. So what do we do with the things that take too long to see in our lifetime that like we can't know right now? I think that we can look at history, and that's kind of what the purpose of history is to me. Is it's letting the people of the past make the mistakes so that we don't have to in the present to the best of our abilities. Because like there's nothing new under the sun other than maybe AI. That's a new thing. But in terms of like general debates about what should the role of government be, say in labor or education or healthcare, how much should things be privatized versus like being public, what kind of regulations do well over a 10, 20, 30, 40-year time span. We've ran we need to run way more experiments, but we've run a good number of them, I think, in our history as a species and even as a country, you know, in the past 300 years, that we can have a pretty good idea of what genres of policy work better and which things don't. And I think that's something that I would like to see taught more in schools. Speaking of things like the Department of Education, is like the true like the history of economic policy, labor policy, and things that we can see how they've played out so that we don't have to repeat the same mistakes, because a lot of the same arguments that are happening today with things that people like Vivek say or Trump or whoever, these arguments have been being made for hundreds of years. And I think there are things to draw from there. But again, that type of conversation is hard because it requires kind of like an autistic deep dive. And one of the things that I would like to do with future content is explore those topics that are very meaningful and I think very important in a way that is funny and accessible. How to do that, maybe a skit format, maybe, I don't know yet. But I think kind of to your point about how do we determine who we can trust, where do we outsource our knowledge to on these deep dives? I would like to do some of that. But I do think that there's a way to learn that stuff, and you can look at history and kind of know what policies do well and don't. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's what I do with my videos. Is I do all that. Like, I, I I'm not the vibes guy, Ron. I am the vibes. I'm not. Also the autist who will spend hours putting together a PowerPoint to do exactly that type of stuff. Um, yeah, you edge. I mean, I don't know what else is. Yes, I assemble as many facts as you possibly can. There are, for all intents and purposes, objective facts out there. So assemble them. Lean on your culture. Like, you have some faith that what you learn in school is relevant, although don't have too much faith. That would be a mistake. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how else for that.
Sure. So I guess from there, I would say whenever we're talking about a person like Vivek specifically saying that he wants to essentially destroy Social Security or he wants to dissolve the Department of Education, I would say these are experiments that have been run. And just to kind of get specific here, because we've been very abstract, and now to get
Let's start arguing. Wrong. Hasn't happened.
yeah, so I think that we have run some experiments. I think that we have seen the consequences of certain philosophies that people like him espouse. And so I would say, in terms of like you saying that you find him trustworthy because you think that he seems very open, very personal. He just has good vibes. So here's where our intuitions are, because I hear a person like Vivek talk, and to me, I get major red flags. I do not trust that guy. I find him to have the vibes of a very deceptive person. So I'm curious. Um, I'm I guess there's no way that you could explain it, but I just, I'm curious why you perceive him in such a trustworthy way, whereas I do
Yeah.
not. And I think that part of that might be due to the fact that like in my study of history
Yeah.
and the philosophies that I have read about, and then my understanding of things like like labor history and all the battles between unions and the government and the fight for regulation and things, all from like the 20s up to now. Whenever I hear a person like Vivek talk, I hear the echoes of all of those same debates and arguments from the 20s, and then whenever we had them again in the 60s and the 70s, the 80s, all through that era. And he, to me, is in a long lineage of people that, at least from my reading, I have seen in history play out very poorly. And so I hear him talk, and I find Vivek charismatic. I find he's funny, and he clearly is a person who is who is a nerd who learned how to be very charismatic. And that's what's so
Yeah.
likable about him, is that it's like, okay, we all can kind of
Yeah.
relate to this guy who kind of, you could tell he was like really nerdy, but he's able to, now he has Riz. And so a nerd with Riz is a very powerful thing. And I find him fun on like a personal level, but when it comes to policy, again, that overrides it for me, because I'm like, okay, social security exists for a reason. It is one of the most important functions that our government serves, in my opinion. It's one of the main that and Medicare are basically two of the biggest purposes of our government and like what it does currently in terms of like monetary spending. And there's a history to these things, and there's a history of people trying to defund these things. And we saw what happened whenever we didn't have these programs. And so that's just why, maybe to me, that knowledge that triggers my pattern thing, my intuition.
Yeah, you disagree with him.
Yes.
You agreed with him, you'd like him. If he was outing labor
I would
policy,
like him more, certainly.
yeah. So that's literally how you have a tribal allegiance that you think is rationally justified. I don't mean that like I'm part of the tribe that thinks, calling the conservatives objectively wrong is stupid. I'm part of that tribe, and other tribes, but you're part of a tribe of labor policy is left wing fundamentally and should be blah, blah blah, whatever. And he's part of the libertarian tribe.
Sure, let's dive into that, because I'm curious to talk about that, the tribe thing, because I don't feel a sense of allegiance to really any group of people. I feel like
Yeah, you do.
I have bounced between groups a lot, to where at this point I feel pretty. I mean, I'm in DGG, of course. I am the Taliban general. That is my cross to bear. Okay, it's a burden.
Yeah.
It's a burden, Paul. But at the same time, I don't feel some kind of like, at the end of the day, it's performative. It's kind of like, if Destiny began to say more things that I didn't like, I wouldn't be his fan anymore. I don't feel like an emotional attachment to a specific person or group that would make me change my views on things at this point in my life, because I've done it so much that I feel like I've hit a point where I'm very in tune to that. I don't feel that that's a thing that I have done in many, many years.
Your
But
tribe are people who share your beliefs.
maybe, I don't know. I mean, in that sense, certainly. If your definition of the tribe is just people who agree with you, then sure, like we're all part of a tribe. I'm talking more in the sense of like having an emotional attachment to a group, insofar that you just kind of outsource your beliefs to that group, and if they think something, you change your mind to kind of fit that group. That's what I'm saying. That I definitely don't feel that I agree with.
If Vivek was making arguments that for example, have you seen what Vivek said about Israel or fucking Palestine?
No, what do you say?
He's the most fucking psychotic, subtler-minded fuck about it.
Oh, that comes as
about
somehow that comes as no surprise to me. I don't know why.
No, of course, yeah. Well, if you want to run for American office, you must first make sure the Israeli government is okay with you.
Well, the smart thing is to make them think that you are, and then you get in. Then
I'm not so fucking conspiratorial about it. It's just like, okay, people say shit all the time that they have to say, like that you like Destiny or some shit like that. But if he was making arguments for fucking let's cut off the breasts of 13-year-old girls if we think it, I'd be like,
always what? Back to the trans kids, Paul.
Well, I know it's the easiest example. It's the most obvious. Like
back to the first time that we ever spoke. It's so nostalgic for me.
That's true. I know. Listen, it look. It just I was not. I literally said at the beginning when my conversation with Destiny, I was like, and I'm just gonna say this. I just want to get hung up on this. And then it was 40 minutes later. It was like
I remember, yeah.
But
there's still that Google Doc that I sent you. It was like 15 pages of a bunch of shit that I put together, and then we just like spent like 2 minutes on it.
Emails too. Every single study that people cite, I'm like, these are for adults. I agree with that. That's what I said.
Sure.
One of the other things, real quick, the reason I also don't care that much about like how I come off in a conversation with Destiny is because anyone who genuinely wants to know can go look up my videos.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Shit on the right, Andrew Wilson, Matt Walsh, Jordan Peters. It's like, So anyone who wants to see it can go see it. So I don't care
Sure.
that.
And to your credit, and I think I even said this, whenever we talked, last year, whatever, that, I mean, you're correct. There haven't been enough longitudinal studies on kids transitioning, and that's completely true. But in order for there to be more, we have to allow some level of that to happen at the extremes. And I think
I
that you think that too, right? Because you told me that even like there should be allowed for some experimental go through like a ton of vetting on some level, some kids, I don't know, 10 a year or something.
I said to Destiny this like 2 or 3 times. Like I'm okay. I legally, morally, I'm not. I think it's actually wrong and it's fucking these kids over. But like, what
Hmm.
I could be wrong. So
Sure.
legally, if they're part of strict controlled clinical studies where they're all followed up on, and if it goes wrong, people are held to account. Fine. I mean, Ken Zucker has given puberty blockers before, and
Hmm.
Jordan
Hmm.
cites Ken Zucker as someone who has influenced his thinking on the transgender kid topic. So it's like, okay, there's clearly nuance here. I have no doubt that there are kids who you could give puberty and who what are actually trans when they're, whatever that means, actually trans, who took puberty blockers and are fine for the rest of their life.
Sure,
So
sure. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that point, because I didn't watch your whole talk with Destiny. I watched most of it, but I just wanted confirmation of that from our talk from all those many, many moons ago, Paul, when first we battled on the internet. I just want to make sure
I
that
don't
I'm
believe
clear on your position there.
I don't I don't know. There's a part of me every time I see one of the double mastectomies or like the fake like phalloplasty, I'm
Hmm.
satanic. Like there's
Sure, sure.
no way to even like I don't care what the medical studies say. It's like these experiments shouldn't be run to begin with. It's just like puberty blockers is probably the extent of it. I don't know.
I would agree. That's probably where I would say is like, we could do puberty blockers, but maybe like the other stuff can wait. I would say that's a totally fair position. That's like totally reasonable.
Okay.
But yeah, just wanted to do a quick little thing just to kind of touch base on that. What were we talking about before that though?
Touch base on the trans kids.
Yeah, just make sure the trans kids are doing okay and everything.
What were we talking about? That we're talking about tribalism.
Yeah, I think so. And then Vivek, um, just because the broader point that I'm trying to lead into here is just like at some point, this has to touch the ground in
Yeah,
terms of
here's
like
a practical
in
thing.
terms of studying the history of the economic policy of the things that he's saying, right?
Yeah, here's a practical thing. Um,
Hmm.
you're wrong potentially about the policy. Like Vivek could be right, and I
Hmm.
mean, forget. I'm talking about the broad concept. It's look, enlightened centrism, baby. It's a fucking pendulum. Okay, sometimes you need to go more left. Sometimes you need to go more right. I think very few people would disagree with the statement. There is enough excess and waste in the federal government that warrants a significant dedicated reduction in waste or like targeted efforts to cut waste. Like that statement broadly. Now, how we go about doing it, whether it's the Department of Education or whatever, fair enough. But like it is conceivable that like those years of policy have worked for a period of time, but like now it's like you said, we don't know long enough. You gave the example of what if it takes a long enough period of time to realize you were wrong. It's like, well, for that, all the history of labor movements, it's like, yeah, but what if the environment is so much different than so much different now than from when it was when those theories and policies worked, or it's just the inevitable, it's the inevitable consequence of those theories that we need to change them, like Social Security. What the fuck? We're not getting Social Security. You know that, right? It's
Yeah,
over. It's a
that's a
pyramid. It
myth. We
was
are
always a
getting
pyramid.
it, and I would encourage you. I would encourage you, Paul. Just real quick point, and I agree with you. There are certain things in the government that should be reviewed. I would agree with that. I think the extent to which people at Elon and Vivek are going to do it is excessive and dangerous. And
Fair.
it's like if you come across a fence in a field, don't tear it down until you know what
True.
it is there for, right? Pre-Benzo Jordan Peterson, if there are mechanisms in place in your culture and your country for generations and generations, you probably should have a healthy understanding and respect for them before you change or destroy them, right? So, but to your point, also, you're also correct that some things should be reviewed for sure. Um, I would just say that I had a point that I was about to make, and then it left my head, but it was a really good one. It was a really, really good point.
You gotta
And it
start
was about Vivek.
that.
Oh, okay. You said that you're like, in terms of like finding people that are trustworthy, that we can listen to and outsource for knowledge. I would say a very, very good one, in my opinion. So if you trust my vibes, I think Sam Cedar is a very, very good reference when it comes to economic policy, specifically things like social security, Medicare, labor, stuff like that. And I would encourage you to watch his content about social security, because he knows it better than any other human being I've heard talk about it, and he has squashed any caller, any person who's ever tried to make that argument to him. At least in my opinion, he has very, very much flattened that idea. We are fine. It is not getting defunded. It's not running out. Um, and the people that say that tend to be like venture capitalist firms and hedge funds that want you to pull out your retirement money and invest money in them, just generally. But that's, it's a footnote for later.
Maybe, but even what you just said, like that's the Norwegian sovereign wealth fund, isn't it? Or no,
I'm
that's
not sure.
sorry, that's an oil fund. There,
Not sure.
there's a model. It's called something like, well, the government would take money that would go to Social Security and buy like the government would have a stake in all these big corporations, like a small stake, and they would reap some of the profits. It's like, dude, that's literally, and like this is like a market socialist idea. It's like, dude, that's what George Bush tried to do, and they said he was privatizing Social Security. It's like, it's all framing.
Say that point again, real quick, about.
There's a market socialist idea that what like a government should do is it should take tax dollars and buy like S&P 500 stuff and put it in a fund, and then like the returns on that fund can then be dispersed for social programs. And it would be like, if the market goes up, it's like, well, how do you counter corporate greed? It's like, well, just basically have the government be a small shareholder that doesn't make decisions but reaps whatever profits occur to fund social programs. And there's all kinds of problems with that, but it's like, this was coming from market.
Sounds reasonable on its face.
Yeah, but this is coming from a market socialist perspective. At least this is what I remember from 3 years ago when someone brought it up. But like,
George Bush tried this though.
That's what. Well, George Bush was saying, hey, instead of Social Security dollars, I guess his was more, Social Security should go, like, you should get to decide where to invest it rather than it goes to the government first. So that would be a little bit different. That would be very.
Yeah.
But
and
but
just
but like the thing, but the same fundamental critiques would be the same, where it's like, well, then if government social programs are dependent upon corporate profits, then you're just going to fuck the law over to just allow corporations to make as much profit as possible, because it funds all these valid social programs. Like, that creates a horrible potential series of incentives. But nothing's perfect.
Sure. And just real quick to this commenter that said Rowan is completely wrong here. I think in reference, I believe, to Social Security not running out. I just want to point out, and go watch Sam Cedar talk about this, but the broad argument here is that people say that it's going to run out by 2035. And that's like the main thing that you'll hear all these people, like hedge funds and stuff, say. The thing that runs out in 2035 is a trust fund that was set up in like 1982 or something. And that is scheduled to run out if we do nothing at the moment. But even if that is completely emptied, that reduced total benefits temporarily by, I think, like 13%. So 87% of benefits would still exist. Just a quick note to that commenter. But I guess my broader point here is that to assess people like Vivek and to talk about this stuff, it does require, right, a dive into the policy and into the history. And then the reason that I find that interesting is because I feel like in our podcast that we've done in the past, like whenever I have tried to dive into stuff like that, you have just like called me autistic and like not really wanted to dive into it. So, which it does take a level of autism to dive into that stuff. But it's like you just said that, yeah, the vibes are important, but also we do have to touch the ground at some point and make those dives. But then it seems like those dives are not really things that you have been willing to want to do in the past. So I'm just kind of curious in terms of like, is your position shifting on that, or like where do you stand right now in terms of the kind of conversation that you want to have with people? Do you want to have more of like a meta conversation about communication, or are you wanting to do that and also do those dives onto things to kind of pressure test policy positions from people like Vivek?
The reason I don't want to hear is because I don't trust you to have enough expertise in the matter to make the right call.
Sure, and that's fine. But like, I think that's
Why?
what the dialogue is for, though, right?
Well, this is why the most informative possible thing is a productive debate between two of the leading people in whatever issue you're arguing about.
Mm-hmm.
I would much rather watch, I would love to watch Destiny discuss the Department of Education thing with Vivek. That's the only real way that I could tell you. Like, if I think Vivek is making a good case, it sounds good to me, but I ultimately don't know. I need to see him go up against the person who I think, who, if anyone is capable of dismantling him and proving that he's a liar, let's go with Destiny. Like, that's
Sam Cedar, be a great one.
Sam Cedar too. That's my point. And I actually believe that is the best way to get to knowledge generally. I actually don't like deep dives into, like, not everything has to be challenging, but like when there is contention, like if you're trying to learn the theory of evolution, you can learn that like in just a lecture or something like that. A good communicator, they don't need to be challenged while they're doing it. But once you get to things that people dispute, which I guess evolution is, but whatever, you have to, it has to come to a debate. And I think that is the best way of creating new knowledge. Again, assuming it's an actual, like, people want, like, it's not like just fucking optics and shit, like talking over each other or whatever, just to win. It's like, actually, like, I think I'm right, here's why I think you're wrong, blah, blah, blah. That's the best way to get to knowledge. And that's why I watch debates, and that's why I pose the questions like to Destiny or whatever. That's why I ask you stuff. But like when it comes to economics, it's like, I mean, I've seen Milton Friedman debate people, and like, you know, he seems pretty convincing. And I've seen Yanis Varoufakis. Yanis Varoufakis is absolutely correct when it comes to techno-feudalism. That's 100% right. So like, there's all not right wing, but like he's 100% correct, even though he's a left wing. He's a Marxist, self-described. So there's both sides are in possession of truth, Ron. It is the synthesis, the enlightened synthesis, where we can access it most.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, but I think that debates can be good for that, but I think that both of the people involved have to be like relatively good faith, and I think that there are also ways to just gish gallop and like destroy debates to where they're not actually productive. And so I would agree with you that like I enjoy debates too. I don't necessarily think that that's the best format for learning, just because of the nature of how rapidly claims are said, and then how quickly people can pivot and change topics. Like
Okay, that's
a
fair.
debate is a great starting place, I think, but then I think that it does like require reading afterwards to kind of like fact check people and see which side subsumes the other in terms of like broader context. You know what I mean?
I will walk it back to some degree and say, for me, absolutely, debate is the single best. I won't necessarily say that's true for everyone, but I do kind of think that might be true, because that's opponent processing, and that's a sort of like truism of like when you talk about, there's all kinds of like fucking physics laws and like computer science laws that have to do with like the ultimate way to get precision on something is by having two opposing forces like mediate it, right? Like if you want to move slowly across the screen, like in a smooth motion, it's better to push it against, and you can get a lot smoother motion.
Yes,
like,
yes.
Our opponent, like your mind is like, there's complicated things for that, but yeah, I also, again, there's a practical reason around, like, here I am talking to you. Who am I? What am I doing here? What is my life? What's the purpose of all this?
Sure.
And economics, like, I didn't ask Destiny what he thought about Vivek's plan about the Department of Education to learn about like the actual. I didn't ask him to learn about the actual plan. I asked him to find out how he would go about and what he would say to an idea like that, which is
Sure, which is a good.
they are, but they're different. I'm not articulating very well, but like
No, sure, and which is a worthwhile conversation to have, which is a totally separate conversation from like the truth of the policy, right? So it's like there's a time to have the policy debate, and then there's a time to have a meta conversation, kind of, or just a broader conversation
yeah,
about
I like
communication style and how we find people trustworthy, right?
yeah. I think people. This is Max Carson did a number on the Destiny
I
discourse.
have his shirt. I have the same shirt that
Nice.
Max wears on his shows. Yeah.
And people like meta conversations is a negative tinted term, and I do understand why, and I do think that to some degree. And I guess I'm defining meta conversation in a different way, because like talking about I am much more interested in the process by which we examine the facts rather than the facts themselves per se.
Sure. Yeah, because I mean they're certainly both important, but they're different topics, right?
Yeah, they're both
and
facts.
yeah, I mean I would agree that I care about both of those topics as well.
I care about the process way more than the actual facts themselves. In part because, and this could be a very just practical difference between Destiny and I, is like Destiny, because he's a more influential figure, feels a greater responsibility to be honing down on the very specific facts, whereas like to the degree that I have a role, like my role is to focus on a different set of facts than he's focused on, I guess. So like if it just becomes a matter of like, well, he wants to talk about this and I want to talk about this, and to be fair, it's his stream that I was on, so there were multiple times during the Vivek thing I was like, I already know where this is going, and it's like I would rather talk about something else.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, and I guess I think of that like I care about the process too, insofar that like the communicator part of me cares about the process, because you need to like know about the process to be able to kind of like influence it and like understand, right? But then the consumer in me just cares about the facts, because like just as a human, just as a base haver of a body, I care about knowing and understanding truth for its own sake first. Like I want to understand how the world works and how the processes of things take place, just because that's like satisfying to me to know.
No, that can't be true. Impossible.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Truth for the truth's sake.
This is where I disagree with you. I think that it's good to be curious and to want to know the truth about things, even if
you don't think that I would agree with that? I agree. It is good to be
well,
curious.
but it sounded like that's what you just disagreed with.
No, I'm disagreeing with there's no such thing as liking the truth for the truth's sake.
I disagree. I think that you can care about wanting to learn about things just because you want to understand how they work, even if you're not going to like influence policy or something. Or if you want to influence policy, you first have to know how things work, right? So that it's kind of like the first step, even if you never end up applying it. I think it's okay to learn about things just kind of for their own sake, just for fun, like to like watch like my girlfriend is a biology major now, and she's going to use that, but I'm just saying she has friends also who just she tells them fun facts about biology. They might never use this, but like they like learn about some obscure fox or some animal in South America that they're never going to apply, but it's just it's fun to know things about the world, I guess. I think that's okay, right?
Yeah, but that's not truth for the truth's sake, because you're the set of truths that you are concerned with are constricted by your utterly subjective moral values. Like you don't care how.
Of course, yeah.
Right. So there's no such thing as a truth for the truth's sake. There are things.
Wow, it's
there's
pedantic.
truth. There's truth that satisfies your deeper intuitions and desire for truth. That's not the same. That's
truth. What I mean by truth for the truth's sake. It's what I mean by that is like.
But hold on. Okay. Those deeper intuitions are constrained, and they focus on things that are ultimately serve practical functions. This is the pragmatic thing again. Like, the reason you're interested in facts about animals is because animals are like inherently more interesting than fucking the number of hairs on someone's head, or the number of paint chips in a pile of paint chips.
Yes, no, I agree with all of this. I know this, but I'm saying that like,
I get what you mean. This is me. See,
yeah,
this thing, I'm being anti-vibes right now, because vibe-wise, I know what you mean. Like, I just like learning about things. Like, I'll pick up a book and just be like, oh, this is interesting. So if I'm going by vibes, I
yeah,
know.
no, that is for sure what I mean.
Okay, but now,
Um,
listen, vibes are for the fucking tools, as we learned. Clearly, like,
Vibes are for the enlightened centrists, Paul. What
correct.
are you
They're,
talking about? Facts are for
if we're being
for
autistic,
autists. It don't matter.
so if we're being autistic about this, technically no, because any fun fact you find has been pre-selected for you. Especially if you read a book, it's like someone went and pursued
I
their.
agree with everything that you're
Okay.
about to say. Yes. Yes, technically, every single piece of knowledge is filtered through like an infinite set of like value structures from like other humans that precede you and all of that. But in terms of learning things that you might not immediately apply,
Yep.
maybe they are pragmatic in ways that you can't articulate. So maybe even if you just like learn things for the sake of knowing them, you don't know if that will be pragmatic later on. Um, you know, this ties into, I think, that time that I tried to explain to you my model of gender, and you were like, "This doesn't matter. This is blah blah blah." But it's like, well, but it's like there are some things that you might not know their pragmatic application until you like flesh them out, right? So it's like I'm just saying that there's like,
Yes, it's sort of like gambling. Like, well, I could throw a dart I could throw a dart in the dark, and it might hit something. It's like, yeah, you could, or you could turn the light on and then decide that what you want to throw the dart at based on.
well, but I mean, I think that whenever you're learning about the truth about things that are important, that truth will always be pragmatic by virtue of it being true about an important thing.
Yeah, but
So it's like about economics. Um,
yeah,
and
that's important because it serves human flourishing, which you're fundamentally concerned with, not economics.
yes, I agree.
Pragmatism.
But
Welcome.
I'm saying that like a person could learn about economics and then never enact change on the world. Like they could never like run
Yeah.
for senator or like do anything material with it, but they would still know it. And I would say that maybe that is knowledge that could be pragmatic, but they just learned it for the sake of learning it, right?
Okay, I guess I could also count the number of hairs on someone's head, and I would know that. But like,
Yeah, but that doesn't have anything to do with one. Paul, I sense frustration and anger in you, to quote a good
no,
friend of mine.
no,
I
no, I don't feel anything. I don't have feelings.
okay. So my broader point here
I do have to
is
piss.
which sorry?
I do have to piss. But
Okay,
no,
you
no, 10,
go
15,
pee and come back if you want.
we'll wrap it up at 20, 15 minutes.
Sure. I mean, you can go pee now if you want, and then just come
No, no,
back.
I can hold it. It's not that bad.
Okay. I'm trying to remember what I was saying before
Could
you so
I could piss.
rudely interrupted me and autistically critiqued the thing that I was saying.
Yeah.
Where was I going with that about truth and
Uh,
economics? Oh,
you
okay.
said
Just that I think because you were saying, okay, you were saying that you care about the process way more than you care about like the factual truth of certain policies. Am I correct? And did I hear you correctly?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so what I was saying was in response to that, that I think I'm in some sense like um I view it like the communicator in me cares about the process, but the person in me cares about like I want to know the truth first. Um I think partly just because I want to I just want to understand reality. Now, if you want to call that truth for truth's sake or like a pragmatic thing, we can call like anything, but just I would describe it as I want to know the nature of how the world around me works because that just it is a satisfying thing for me to know. And I like if I'm inside of like a matrix, I would want to know it. Maybe even if there was no like immediate pragmatic application. I think that I want to know things that are true. And then once you know truth, then it becomes like you're talking about the process of okay, how do we communicate it? How do we study how other people come to know truth? That's kind of how I would view it, I think. Like I want to know things for myself first and foremost, and then I want to make the world better with that knowledge. And I parse those things into two. I mean, I'm just curious. I mean, do you feel that same way, or do you feel like, and I'm
No,
not sure. Like, I guess
I
talk
do.
more about like what you mean by you care about the process more than the facts.
I care about the process by which we figure out which facts are relevant more so than the facts themselves.
Okay.
Like that's pragmatism. And I am waiting for the day that you finally take enough acid to reset your brain because it's so powerful. You have so much computing power there. And you have so many facts. You have so many good files on the computer and so much raw processing power. But your current directory is pointed to the wrong folder. Okay. You need to.
Okay. Tell me about that. How do you think that I put my brain power into the wrong folder?
You're not a pragmatist. You
Sure I am.
you haven't submitted to maps of meaning yet.
Sure I have. I think that I have. Do you tell me how you think I have not?
You still keep saying this whole truth for the truth's sake thing.
No, but I mean, but you know what I mean by that. I mean, like that
Yeah.
it's good to know things that are true about important topics.
Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah, that's all
Oh,
that's all that statement means.
okay.
I call that truth for truth's sake
Okay.
because because the reason I word it like that is because I think I don't like the wording of saying, well, I only want to know things that I can like that are like immediately useful or pragmatic to me. Because it's like, well, not everything that is useful is good. Like if you know how to manipulate people and then you do it for a bad purpose, like I don't know, Hitler was really good, to use Godwin's law here. He was great at talking to people, but he used it for a bad purpose. So it's like things can be useful and things can be true. Not all things that are true are useful. Not all things that are useful are true, right? So it's like I just separate them in my head, and all I mean to say is that it's like I view them in two buckets. Like I want to know things that are true about things that I think are important, and then I want to convey those things to people in ways that are good and that are tested.
That's
So,
fair.
which I
You want
believe
to
that we're in agreement on.
you want to spend the last few minutes understand having me educate you as to why your model of the world is completely wrong.
Sure, but I think that we broadly agree. I don't think
I
that
know why we get along so famously.
yeah, I mean, why is that model incorrect? What do you think that's
There
wrong?
is such thing as see, this is what I was about to say.
Wait, real fast. I just
Sure.
want to point out that we agreed earlier about the model of epistemology that I drew. We agree there is base truth that is outside of us. There's how we come to know
Yeah.
it, and
Yeah.
then there's how we
That's
persuade people about it, right?
right.
And so that's all I'm saying. There is the truth in this
Yep.
bucket, and then there's how and how we come to know it, and then there's how we communicate that truth to
Yeah.
people. That's all I'm saying.
That model. That's why I remember at the very beginning I said I agree with it provisionally because it's wrong.
Okay, give me the provisions.
There is no objective truth.
I believe that there is.
There isn't. That's why you're
Okay.
wrong.
Tell me why you think there's no objective truth.
Is time objectively real?
Um, that's I don't know. I don't consider time in that same genre of questioning.
So I brought this up last time. If I'm conscious and you're conscious and I'm on a planet with like 50 times the gravity, I will experience time phenomenologically different from you. Like in
hmm
Interstellar, that's
hmm Yeah, I mean, time is just the process of like reality happening. I mean, it's
okay.
it's you
So
know.
if all consciousness was wiped out, there'd be no experience of time. There'd be no experience of duration.
hmm
So what would reality be then? Where in time would you put reality?
I don't know. I don't know.
And I would say this is God of the gaps. Well, there's objective truth out there, but I
No,
just
no,
don't.
no, no, no. So, take an example in history. Like, I don't know. Like, there's say maybe there was a farmer who lived like things are either true or they're not, right? So in a very grand psychedelic philosophical sense, I agree with you. Like technically there's no like who knows about, this all could be a dream. It could all be I could be the only like real person who exists, and like,
Right.
like you're fake. That could be the case.
Yeah.
But I think that
That's what I mean, by the way.
sure, but in this reality, I would say if I put this pencil behind my laptop, okay, and then it's like maybe like I leave the room or I ask you like, hey Paul, do you think that my pencil was behind my laptop? It either is or it isn't. And there is a fact of the matter that if you say yes or no, it's not behind my laptop, you can be right or wrong about that. Now, your method of coming to know that truth might be flawed. Mine might be flawed, but there is a correct answer to that question. The pencil either is or is not behind my laptop, right? So it's like things. So that's what I mean by it's like there is a truth to things. There is a truth, like to make it pragmatic, because you love pragmatism, right? Let's get less abstract and like more like real here. I mean, it is the case either that the burning of fossil fuels is contributing to climate change, or it's not. There is a fact of the matter there. Can we come to know it through our methodology? We should always try to be better at that. But there is some fact of the matter there. That's not a matter of opinion. It's a fact, right? If we do vaccines cause autism, right? Like these things are they either are true or they're not. And so that's more what I mean. If it's like there is a ground truth, and then we try to come to know that ground truth through flawed methods, and then we communicate it to people. So would you broadly agree with that?
Yeah, up to a point, but there's categorical. The fundamental truths are not like that. Like what? Like once you start with protons, neutrons, electrons, you can get all of matter.
Mm-hmm.
Those are fundaments. Now it's like what do you quarks? I don't know fucking fit how deep it goes, but like when you get to elementary particles, it's like, well, what's beneath those? It's like,
Yeah, I don't know.
right?
It's something, but like I can't come to know it. There is some base truth about what it is, but I'll never know what that is because I don't have the hardware to comprehend it. I don't think I do.
Right, that's what I mean by no objective truth.
No, but the truth still is there. We just can't know what it is, and we may never know what it is.
Yeah, and you know what? I think I mean this in the least ironic way, although I'm going to say it anyways, like, this might be the schizo intuition, where it's just like, bro, if I don't exist, why should I believe no, I'm saying if I die, like if I cease to exist, why should I believe that the reality that you inhabit continues to exist with it? The reality is that the concept of reality only exists because I exist. Because
I agree with you from a phenomenological perspective. I totally agree with, and I understand what you're saying.
From a what perspective? You said from a what perspective do I agree with you?
From the phenomenological perspective. Yeah, I understand and I agree with what you're saying. I do.
Phenomenological perspective is deeper than it's the deepest reality. There is no deeper reality than
I think from the matter of personal experience, I agree. But I think whenever we're talking about politics, I think that the opposite is true. And it just depends on kind of what lens you're trying to view it through, right? Because on one level, reality only exists within my head. To me, you only exist as an experience, right? To you, I only exist as an experience, right? And so all that is true. And like whenever I die, all of reality goes away to me because it was only ever here. I've done acid too, Paul. No, but I think that is true. While at the same time, I think that we can also, if we want to get like less abstract and more kind of concrete about it, it's like, well, whenever my granddad died, the world kept existing around him. I think I can logically infer that whenever I die, the world will keep existing around me. Like like we watch our pets die, we watch our parents die, and the world keeps on ticking. And so I think it's fair to assume, even if that perspective is from a camera in our heads that we're still inventing, I think it is getting at a thing that is actually outside of us, that the world will go on when we die. And so, from that perspective, there is truth. Like even if we can't know it, if there was like a higher dimensional being, that could know it. Like if God is real, maybe God knows the truth about these things. And just the fact that even hypothetically there could exist some dimensional being that could know the truth value of it means that the truth value exists, even if we can't come to know it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but then it's like, yeah, I mean, truth is doing a lot of work there at that point. It's like, well, what is the truth about the fifth dimension or the seventh dimension? It's like,
yeah, I don't know. I think that truth is just what is. But again, I think that we can get less abstract about it and more concrete to just say that. And again, this, I mean, if we disagree on this, that's fine. But I do believe that truth exists. I believe that there is a fact of the matter, and that what the purpose of science is to discover that fact of the matter. Because if there was no objective truth, then what would the purpose be in doing science at all if we're not trying to get at the thing that is objectively true? Why do we even try to find out facts then?
it's the closest thing to objective truth we have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree that the method by which we come to know things is trying to get the closest that we can get to that objective truth that exists, but we'll never know it for certain, which kind of comes back to the model from the beginning, right? So I'm not sure where we diverge on this exactly. Like, do you not believe that there is an objective truth at the bottom of anything and it's all just like,
well, reality exists.
That just feels like nonsensical to me, like not like in like an insulting way. I'm just trying to like wrap my head around, like I feel like that there is, we either are causing climate change or we're not, right? Like there's, or we contribute to it or we're not. There's a fact there, right?
Yeah, I think we both need to be on more drugs to be discussing it at the level that I think that I thought we were discussing it at. I agree. It's like, yeah, it's like if we're talking about the best strategy in Call of Duty, like we need to kill as many of our enemies as possible. Like if we're not talking about Call of Duty, then that's not the strategy we should be talking about. But Call of Duty is within the broader plane of reality. So like in some sense, that would be the objective strategy in that provisional setting.
Sure. And just to be charitable, because again, Paul, I am Dr. Destiny. Sorry, I am Dr. Destiny. I'm not Mr. Borelli. I see what you're saying and I agree with you. But I think that phenomenological, very deep philosophical perspective is valid, but I think it doesn't really, like, I don't think it's appropriate or good, or we could even say pragmatic, to apply that to politics. Like, I think that whenever we're talking about a policy that like Vivek is saying, I think it's the pragmatic thing to do is to use the model of like there is a base truth and that we need to try to get at it and then communicate it to people. Um, like it's just like a different perspective of like looking at reality, that has its setting, like in like a personal setting, like whenever I'm like laying in bed at night, I'm like, yeah, man, like this is all in my head, whatever. And like I do feel that, like my life feels like very surreal like that for sure. But I think in the context of like of politics and how we ought to talk about policy and apply policy, it's good to use the model that there is an objective truth and we need to, as best as we can, figure out what it is so that we don't, as the Jorp likes to say, stumble blindly into walls and not let people like Vivek like cake be like, let's just destroy Social Security. If your SSN ends with an even number, you're out. That's an odd number, you're out. It's like, because that's like batshit crazy to me.
That's not what, that wasn't about Social Security. That was how he was going to fire bureaucrats.
No, he said about Social Security that if your number ends in an even number, you're out.
I thought,
I believe.
no,
am I wrong about that?
I thought that's how he was going to determine whether or not federal bureaucrats were fired. He's like, we got
okay.
percent. We'll just do even or odd Social Security numbers.
Okay, well that's still fucking retarded, but you know.
Well, that's completely not what you thought it was, and that because if that, well, that would be completely fucking dumb.
Yeah. So what
if it was
he said was
awesome.
Less insane than I thought, but still insane, still in the same order of magnitude, I would say.
Okay.
Sorry?
Insane are the homeless people who are dripping brown snot on the L without any shoes, talking to themselves. That's insane. So when you say Vivek is insane, I get it's hyperbolic, but I don't know how hyperbolic, because I genuinely think you think that that's like so beyond fuck. It's like, I think it's probably like Elon came in, fired 75% of Twitter, and it still basically works from a technical point of view. You can argue about the moderation stuff, but those weren't the people he fired. He fired the engineers, and engineering-wise, it seems to be fine. And
I think it's as insane as a homeless.
I think you can clean like 80% of it up.
I think if it's as insane to take the people in government and just put them on a list and fire every other one with just be like, we'll see what happens. That is as insane as the homeless person who's like pissing himself on the street.
Okay,
like for sure.
Assuming you have to fire several 100,000 people in the span of like a week, how do you do it?
First off, you shouldn't fire 100,000 people in the span of a week. I would say that you could carefully go through the departments and you should run some kind of analysis on like the role that they serve and if they're doing things that are good. And if you decide that they have been a net negative and their position doesn't like do anything meaningfully regulatory, you could fire them.
Like for example,
sure.
The Department of Education stopping school. No, just kidding.
I don't think so. I think that generally, and I'll be brief about this because I know you have to pee. I think generally, my intuition on that, based on my readings, is that any attempt to privatize things that are human necessities, I would say, for flourishing, any attempt to privatize things like healthcare or education, and put an entity in between a human and that good or service to where that middleman can extract profit from it, creates an incentive structure that I think we've seen in history is generally pretty bad in those areas. And deregulation and privatization of things like prisons or schools or healthcare and stuff is pretty, it doesn't turn out well usually. So that's what I would say is my intuition on that.
That's fair.
So, but if you have to pee, I won't keep you. I'd love the chat again soon. We can talk about whatever you want. And look, I'm down. I want to have these conversations in a way that make us both happy. So I want to do like, if you want to talk about communication, we can do that. If we ever want to talk about a policy, we can go into that. Just any structure that you want to do. I am down to do that. So, you know.
Talk about memes and memetics.
I'm always down to talk about memes. Yeah, man, I'm gonna be the Nick Fuentes of the left. That's my plan.
Nice.
That's my new plan with my channel. And I'm gonna talk like this all the time.
That's
and
fine.
I'm gonna say that labor rights are back on the menu. That means that Medicare for all is back on the menu, and we're gonna have something like social democratic rule in America in a good way. I'm gonna do that bit every single day.
Listen, rule number 1 of radical centrism: rob the radicals of all their good stuff, good talking points, good vibes. Rob them of their vibes. Okay, sure. Fucking hilarious. That's the worst part about Nick Fuentes. Same with the worst part about fucking Alex Jones. Worst part about Andrew Tate. Worst part about fucking Hassan's not funny. He's not that funny. I have laughed out loud before. I'd be lying if I hadn't said that. But he's not nearly as funny as those other guys, which is part of the problem. But yeah, rob the radicals of their vibes and talking points.
Sure.
All right, sir. I got this fucking dog that I'm watching. He barks.
All right, don't Michael Vick it or anything. But it was great talking to you, man. And let's do it again soon.
All right, Godspeed.
Thanks.
Peace.
Okay, there we go.